Welcome back to Cheche. We're live on Citizen TV. The debate has carried on during the break. So we've seen plenty of plot twists and turns in the drama over the IEBC. But could the constitution of the Joint Parliamentary Select Committee be the end of the IEBC as we know it? Our guests are the Deputy Speaker of the Senate, nominated Senator Cheche. She's speaking for Jubilee, while Norman Magaya is the Chief Executive Officer of the CORD Secretariat, and he's clearly speaking for CORD. And so we've talked about the timelines, we've talked a bit about the mandate, and so now we and the report, what happens, but now let's talk about what happens next in terms of the restructuring of what the electoral process. What do we expect to see? I think Senator Elachi, you were sort of saying, I think maybe tongue-in-cheek, that you don't expect that anyone will want to work for the new IEBC.
Absolutely. I'm trying to ask myself, which Kenyan is this now who we will trust and not come and do the things we've just done to this team? And I know that I always say there are two institutions in this country, NHIF and NSSF, three, and IEBC. These are very critical institutions. If you're not careful, you can find yourself gone to heaven without knowing how you're going to heaven. So first of all, we need to ask ourselves as politicians, who are these Kenyans that we will now entrust to do this job? They will be willing to do a fantastic job, just the way we have a good CEO now who has tried, but he's found himself into a very awkward situation, and he might be part of the team that will be going home. You never know. So, and he hasn't been with the team, but you see, he's being blamed in something he doesn't understand also. So even as politicians, we are moving forward so that we have Kenyans who can appreciate, they would want to work and do a good job for us. We have to be very careful in how we also handle the processes of removing them. The other thing is that we need to ask ourselves, as we bring in a mechanisms of bringing the new team that will come in, how do we ensure also Kenyans appreciate that mechanism so that they don't say the politicians took the process and they've decided to do it this way? And all of us as politicians, we need to look at Kenya now. I think Kenya has moved. We might be thinking so backwards, and you find your electorate is so enlightened, they are even wondering, what are you talking about? It is us who will wake up in the morning, you only have one vote, I only have one vote, and therefore they will decide what they will decide. So as politicians also, let us try and appreciate the country is moving. These young people, the way they think is not the way we think.
David, do you think the electoral reform should be broader and focus not just on the IEBC,
well, yes,
but other actors within the pipeline?
In the electoral arena, there are quite a lot of things which are not right, from the political parties and how they conduct their own nominations, the times allowed for the nominations to happen before even things are transferred into the hands of IEBC. And a lot of the things which have gone wrong, which were identified as having been failures of the IEBC, were sometimes outside the control of IEBC, quite a lot, including late procurement of things and processes that were pushed because legislators kept changing the law and pushing the ball into the IEBC court. Now, these things need to be firmly reviewed. The law needs to be very set clearly to allow for processes to have ample time to mature and be done, managed properly by the IEBC. But also, political parties and the dispute resolution mechanisms, the ability of the electoral body to punish deviance, people who are offending the electoral law. The political parties, register of political parties is still a whole area that no one wants to touch since the National Accord. These things need to be firmed up, and I just hope that they'll be part of the broader electoral reforms that accompany these changes, so that we sail clearly once and for all.
Would you agree with that, Mutegi, before we put that to our guest?
True, there are a lot of problems in electoral processes. One, some he has not touched, like electoral spending. There is a new bill that they're trying, I don't know that they got through. The use of state resources, which happened all over during these by-elections. All those things, will the new Electoral Commission be having the power to manage those things? Because some of them are beyond them. I think would be the new reforms going to institute that.
Do they not run the risk then of saddling this committee with too much?
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. That's what I ask.
What do you think, Mr. Mayor?
I think the committee has its work cut out. One, to deal with the question of electoral processes, and in that we wish that the question of voter registration and compilation of the voter register is firmly handled. And of course you can't talk about voter registration without tying Article 12 to Article 38. That Article 38 is not a self-propelling right. It is tied to Article 12.
What are those
on acquisition of Article 12 is acquisition of ID cards. Article 38 is the right to register as a voter. But you cannot exercise that right to register as a voter if you are curtailed under Article 12. So I think, and that remains a grey area. It's a grey area that no institution has looked into as to why there are delays all over, and they do not just affect somebody's participation in the electoral process in the country. They affect the economic lives of many Kenyans. So I think it's another critical area that must be dealt with. We will wish to see the question of election management, results management, and declarations properly enumerated in the law, so that it is not about who is the commissioner. Actually, I have no worry as to who will be the commissioner at the commission. If the law is so fixed that this person has a well-oiled machine to enable them perform their duties. The reason why they find themselves in difficulty is that there are so many loopholes in the law, and they fall for those traps and manipulation. So that what we need as persons who will serve in this commission are people who can withstand pressure and purely undertake their patriotic duties. And I think there are sufficient Kenyans who can undertake that work. So you're optimistic that you'll be able to find new people to join you? Certainly, more than enough. More than enough. Already I've seen so many people angling for those positions from both sides of the political divide. So there is no doubt that we will have that done. But I think from what will be filed in Parliament as a motion establishing this committee, it's not an open-ended process. The committee will have the confines within which it will work in terms of defining what areas they are going to touch, because there are areas that will clearly be beyond what they can do, and you can't expect them to do magic. So they will handle the whole question of electoral process, and I think part of the recommendations will then be reflected in the draft bill that they will come up at the end, which will accompany the report to the National Assembly. And the undertaking was that what we need to do in terms of facilitating a smooth electoral process is that we must be able to tie ourselves down and say, after we have enacted these amendments to electoral laws, let's not have any amendments until after elections. Because if you look at what happened last time, the Elections Act was amended until almost 60 days to the elections. And so the Electoral Commission was forced to keep shifting timelines. And I think there is also, it's also important that the Treasury also releases funds in time for them to start the procurement process. Because if you take it too close to the election, then event arrival also creeps in. And sometimes the Commission will not have the capacity. Because the tender rivalry is not just between the people wanting to provide the services to the Commission and the Commission. So many agencies come in, including the political class. I'll interrupt you for a minute, just to say, you know, we have the goodwill to ensure that this, you know, electoral amendment is passed as it pertains to the IBC. But there are other critical issues which the panelists have outlined: incumbency, the use of funds, misuse of state resources. Within Parliament, we have seen that aspects of the political and electoral laws have been subjected to tyranny of numbers. So what guarantee do we have that once you achieve this bipartisan, change to the electoral laws and the IBC, that you won't then
fix your eyes on incumbency and then go to the streets again, that you won't then fix your eyes on the political parties' funding and go to the streets again, that you won't then fix your eyes on something within the electoral landscape that irks you, if we're not going to do it comprehensively?
I think there are already signs that if we do not pass the election financing bill, we are going to have the most expensive election in the history of this country. I think the signs are already there, and it can be evidenced by the magnitude of corruption that has happened. All that is geared towards oiling an electoral process, and I think it's important that we pass the election financing bill, because what the bill does is not really to curtail the spending per se, but to give everyone a fair chance who want to participate in an election as a candidate, to compete on an equal footing and convince people purely based on ideas and policies and win. That has to be done. And that is not within the purview of this committee. There is already that bill before Parliament, the election financing bill, so we can't recall it. No. And I don't think serious issues have been raised with the election financing bill. I think the legislature is adequately prepared to deal with it. Okay. And enact it in a manner recommended by the Electoral Commission. As a lawyer, I'll ask you to explain this very quickly, because we have to wind up. And this is a question from one of our viewers. Will this amendment of the Constitution through the back, will this report not amount to an amendment of the Constitution through the back door without a referendum? I think what is clear in our mind is that the Constitution should not be touched in terms of an amendment prior to this election. I think where we are now, we do not enjoy a bipartisan sound political environment to objectively look at an amendment of the Constitution. So I think the question of, and I think when we met religious leaders, one of the things we agreed with them is that the question of reviewing the Constitution and auditing it, we leave it to a process after the election. When the temperatures have toned down, then we can sit down and say what is working, what needs to be fixed. It can be dealt at that time. What we are dealing with now is purely legislative. There is no intention to touch the Constitution in any material manner. So there is no any attempt whatsoever that either it is imagined or it's factual anywhere to amend the Constitution in any means. If anything, Article 255 to 257 are very clear on the procedure for amending the Constitution. You cannot circumvent that process and attempt anything that you legislate. The report and the recommendations therein and the bill that will be brought before Parliament will be within the framework of the Constitution. It will be within the framework of the Constitution, yes. Okay, so we're winding. Because if anything is unconstitutional, anybody will go to court and strike it out. Yeah. Okay, so we're winding up now, and I'll come to you, guest Senator and Ms. Magaya, for your final thoughts. But from the panelists, and David, you've already expressed optimism. I think Mutegi, you're a bit more pragmatic about whether it goes through or not, as you know, being a function of democracy. But this committee starts its work this week. Right, at some point this week. We don't know, you know, things have to be tabled, and in the first sitting they have 30 days within which to, you know, carry out their work. So the question we've asked our viewers has been, you know, whether there's an end in sight. To be honest, not many of them think there is an end in sight. So are you optimistic that this will be, that this will see this end to the deadlock over the IBC, and that we will, in terms of drawing down of tensions ahead of the elections, that we'll see a much calmer run-up?
Yeah, I don't know why anyone should doubt it. It looks like the sufficient goodwill exhibited by both the government side and the CORD coalition and other speakers on this matter. The timelines are also very clear. This needs to be expedited. It needs to be hurried through. 30 days may be heavy. I hope the committee does not begin extending, because we are stuck with the election date of August next year, and that again, as Norman has said, is written in the Constitution. No amendment is going to be made to it. So every effort is going to be brought to make sure that these amendments or these reforms or whatever electoral reforms happen, and I think they will happen.
Mutegi?
My worry is, once you kick out the electoral commissioners how do you bring new ones? I don't think they have agreed on how the committee is supposed to look at that, because the stakes are very high as who becomes, just like the Chief Justice, who becomes the next chairman and who are the commissioners. Because as he says, stealing was done somewhere else in the headquarters. So you want to make sure, if you are a presidential candidate or whatever, you want to make sure that whoever says get that job will not whatever, I don't want to use a bad word,
will not be compromised.
Yes, will not be compromised.
Yes.
so those stakes are high. How they get to know the method to select them, and also the time, because like you said, money must be given, procurement must be done in good time. So that is what my concern is.
Okay. So as we wind up now, your final thoughts, Mr. Maguire, and then I'll come to you, Senator Elachi. Any outstanding concerns, any last words you'd like to leave Kenyans with?
I think, as I said earlier, that a lot of progress has been made, substantial ground has been covered. I think when the committee settles down to work, there is every reason to be optimistic. I think even if you look at the people heading the committee, Senator Kiraitu Murungi is not a stranger to these issues. He was there in the IPPG process in 1997. So there is enough wealth of experience to be able to shepherd this process and quickly resolve the issues surrounding IEBC and the electoral processes in the country. And so I think we are going to have an intense 30 days, hopefully beginning Friday, that will culminate in a clear roadmap for the country going into election, and we remain optimistic that we will have a peaceful, free, fair, accountable and verifiable election.
Senator.
Well, I believe for Kenyans, the most important thing is that we must appreciate it's a political process, but we will adhere to the rules, and I hope the select committee should adhere to the rules and ensure that it is not just their process, but it's a process that brings back the country together. It's a process that will ensure going forward we can bring back confidence to the institution of the electoral body. We can ensure to come up with the mechanisms of ensuring on how to bring in the new commissioners. It's very critical, but we must also ensure we are within the confines of the Constitution, so that no one goes to court to say you cannot select them this way, while we know very well the Constitution says this. So within all that, we must in the end have the principle that we have done this, yes, but within the confines, and we appreciate we have a Constitution that we are going to follow. More importantly is now bringing back also that trust just to Kenyans themselves, because this suspicion that we have to each other, until Kenyans feel whatever processes that happen, they have this fear that it will never work. I think for those who will be in the committee, they must ensure that Kenyans can respect that indeed they can do things with a bipartisan manner and ensure the country takes the credit that this is our country and we are doing it for Kenya.
Great. And so that's where we'll end Cheche this week, because our time is up. I'll thank our guests for their time. We had Senator Beatrice Elachi, nominated senator, the Deputy Speaker of the Senate, and we also had Norman Maguire, the Chief Executive Officer of the CORD Secretariat. I'll also thank our panelists as ever, David Makali and Mutegin Jao. My name is Udwa Kamimo. Thank you for watching Cheche. We'll see you maybe not next week.